Wow, did you guys hear that? That escalated pretty quickly. The deputy director of the White House just said that there is an accumulation plan for the US to buy more Bitcoin. But it gets way crazier. A department in the US government is now officially recognizing Bitcoin as an asset. The US Federal Housing Finance Agency has now officially instructed the mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to consider cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin as assets for mortgage reserves. And that would be absolutely huge because it means that the selling pressure would massively decrease in the market. A lot of people would then stop selling their Bitcoin. That means Bitcoin prices will keep rising. And if you also want to see Bitcoin prices keep going up, smash that like button down below. This is something historic that's happening here. Nothing like this has ever happened before in Bitcoin's history. Bitcoin is now really being put on the same level as global assets. Maybe not quite yet, but it's almost there. So make sure to smash that like button down below right now. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to hit that subscribe button for me. Even Michael Saylor says here, today is truly a historic day. The US mortgage industry is leading, and now the global banking system also wants to get into Bitcoin they want to follow. And here we have Pulte, that's what he calls himself, and he's part of the federal housing thing here in the USA. That's the FHFA. And he just made a massive announcement here that's making waves. Even Michael Saylor reacted to it, as you've already seen. He says here, after thorough review and in line with President Trump's vision to make the United States the crypto capital of the world, today I have directed the major companies Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to prepare their businesses to recognize cryptocurrencies as an asset for mortgage. And that's huge. Here you can also see the decision. And we need to realize right now that Bitcoin is really being integrated into the TradFi world, meaning the traditional financial world. And I've talked about this many times before, that the credit market here, and especially the mortgage market, is just such a massive leverage effect for Bitcoin. We now have potential mortgage-backed Bitcoin investment strategies that we can pursue here. So suddenly, home loans are being over-collateralized with Bitcoin, which of course allows for better terms for both lenders and borrowers. This also leads to a much lower selling pressure on Bitcoin because suddenly people who want to buy houses or something like that can partially use their Bitcoin as collateral, get fiat loans for it, and then basically buy houses with that. That means the housing market will benefit from this, and Bitcoin will benefit as well. And of course, banks will also benefit because there may be very little risk of default. There was also a second very strong statement here from Pulte, who announced the whole thing. So this is the official spokesperson who has already caused quite a stir in recent days with all these statements. Fred, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac, we definitely need to take a closer look at them as well, because there's something really huge behind all of that. So once again, today is a historic day for cryptocurrencies and the mortgage industry, for the entire scene here. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are now able to integrate cryptocurrencies into mortgages. Thank you, President Trump, for making the USA the crypto capital of the world. So now we have a huge pool of assets that's being tapped into the Bitcoin network and vice versa. Of course, the Bitcoin network is also being tapped into this huge pool of assets here. The real estate market overall, I think, is something like 300 trillion or so. Michael Saylor also made a striking statement. Bitcoin would be recognized as a reserve asset by the US housing system, a pivotal moment here for the institutional adoption of Bitcoin and its recognition as collateral. Yeah, so that's just important because nowadays, at which bank is it really possible if you go there and say, hey, I have a Bitcoin here, can I use it as collateral, can I get a loan against it? Then the banks just laugh and say, no, even though the banks don't even realize that Bitcoin is pristine collateral. Because with real estate, I mean, if I want to appraise a property, I have to send someone there, they have to look at the property, and then the value changes every 3 or 4 weeks, or 3 or 4 months, or 3 or 4 years. In theory, I have to reappraise it each time. That costs money again. I mean, with Bitcoin, we have a market price at all times. It's set in a decentralized way. Basically, the market price is just there. I don't have to send out an appraiser for that. Bitcoin is global. Bitcoin basically doesn't need to be maintained or managed either. Of course, that also means I have much less centralization risk compared to real estate. With real estate, I always have to check, okay, are the laws in the country changing? Is there a war? Is the property being bombed? Do I have to sell it again? Otherwise my politics are messed up, and so on. Then you have a property, but you can't really have control over it. So you might have the property on paper, but in reality, you can't make decisions about it because it's the government that decides what happens with the property. There are heating laws, this regulation, that rule, and so on. That's why so many people want to get out of real estate and into Bitcoin, because it gives them much more flexibility. And now there's the possibility to combine both, because earlier we asked ourselves the question, okay, Bitcoin or real estate? Because if I wanted to buy a property just for my lifestyle or something, I had to sell my Bitcoin, but nobody wanted to do that. So you just had the choice, okay, damn, sell Bitcoin or buy real estate. And that was actually bad for both markets. And now you can just say, okay, screw it. Yeah, if I can just keep the Bitcoin, then I'll get myself a property for my lifestyle just to chill a bit in the place. I mean, if I had to sell the Bitcoin now, I wouldn't do it, but if I can basically have both, then I'll just go for it. Or even the worst case, where some people actually sold their Bitcoin, bought a property, and of course, the Bitcoin price suffered because of that. But there was also a bit of criticism because the whole thing has a catch. Bitcoin can now basically be used as a real estate asset here, but with the condition that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have to hold the Bitcoin in custody, meaning you basically have to give up your keys. I always say, not your keys, not your coins, and in this case, you can no longer keep your Bitcoin in self-custody, not in your own hardware wallet. You basically have to hand them over. I always say, get yourself a TREZOR hardware wallet. I'll put a link down below again. That way, you're completely sovereign. No one can censor you or take your coins away from you. But if you take out a real estate Bitcoin mortgage loan or something like that, you have to give up your keys, you have to send your Bitcoins to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and they manage them for you. You just have to hope they handle it well, and if they go bankrupt or bust, your Bitcoins are gone. And that's the big sticking point. That's why, as I said, get yourself a wallet, get a hardware wallet, use something like Bitcoin Hotel, then you can avoid all that, or of course you can take the risk. I mean, these are systemically important banks. You have to understand these are banks that are too big to fail, that could potentially get bailed out, or rather, not banks, but financial institutions to be more precise. And that's exactly what Michael Saylor said very, very early on. You can borrow and lend Bitcoin as soon as systemically important banks get involved here, as soon as JP Morgan has a loan offer, or Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the like, because those are systemically important banks where you can be pretty sure, okay, if push comes to shove, they'll get a bailout package, and then nothing can happen to the Bitcoin keys either. But that's just the theory. In practice, things can turn out differently. And if there's a world war or, I don't know, a major depression, something along those lines, then it could be that even the bailout packages won't help anymore. So, for all the excitement, you always have to stay a bit skeptical here, but of course, it's still a really big step. And yeah, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, I might not have mentioned yet why they're actually so relevant here. The best summary I've actually read was this one. Fannie and Freddie are the invisible giants of the mortgage market. If they accept Bitcoin, it's like Wall Street getting an orange laser eye. Bitcoin becomes part of global real estate financing, and that's just the first half here. Now we've got even more bullish stories. Now we actually have the deputy director of the White House here. Let's listen in for a moment to what he has to say, because this could trigger the next price shock here.
The Genius Act, clarity, those are top of mind for everybody, working on digital assets in the White House. Yeah, there will be the forthcoming reports on the interagency activities. We've already taken some steps with the SBR. How do we follow that up with the, accumulation plan? So there's no shortage of opportunities and things to do. So after we leave here, I'll get right back to it.
What's really, really interesting here is that he also says he's going right back to work, and he mentions there's an accumulation plan. That means there are clear efforts here to actively buy Bitcoin. So this goes far beyond simply converting confiscated coins into a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Now they actually want to actively buy Bitcoin, and then the question always was, okay, are they doing this in a tax-neutral way? That means, for example, do you use customs duties? Do you use, say, tax revenues, mining revenue? Or there were all sorts of different proposals. I once put together a list in an old video. It was something like 8 to 10 points or so. Some of them were really quite bizarre ideas, like transferring assets. There were repeated suggestions, for example, to take underperforming assets, liquidate them, and invest the proceeds in Bitcoin. Cynthia Loomis even wanted to sell gold and put that into Bitcoin. Of course, all of this would be tax neutral. I'm not even sure if it just has to be tax neutral. He also said here, okay, the accumulation plan could also mean that maybe in the long run, this might be changed. In Texas, there's now also a strategic Bitcoin reserve law, and they want to invest 10 million in Bitcoin. And I wasn't entirely sure whether that was actually declared as tax neutral or if they could do it even without tax neutrality. I mean, the focus will probably be on tax neutrality. Bohines has also said it many times, we want to accumulate as much as possible. There's no upper limit either. We don't just want 100,000 or 200,000, we potentially want to buy as much Bitcoin as we can. He also said, what kind of question is that when he's always asked, okay, how much Bitcoin do the USA want to buy? That's like asking, okay, hey, how much gold do you want to have? Of course, as much as possible. 10 tons are obviously better than 5 tons, and 20 tons are better than 10 tons. And it's exactly the same with Michael Saylor, of course. I mean, if you ask Michael Saylor, where's the upper limit? We were just discussing that earlier here in the beer garden. Yeah, so where is the limit now? Is it at 2%, at 5%, at 3%? Yeah, the limit is probably somewhere at the very end. Michael Saylor naturally always wants more, even more, and more. And that's the flywheel effect. I mean, if Michael Saylor ever stops buying Bitcoin, then the flywheel just comes to a halt. And it's pretty much the same with any strategic Bitcoin reserve. You start off and then you just see what you can get and end up buying out the whole place. In any case, these are massive developments. If you still want to buy Bitcoin here, then I'd recommend you act as quickly as possible. Of course, this is not financial advice. Do whatever you want with your money, but time is ticking. Yeah, the clock is ticking, And just yesterday, I said it could happen faster than any of us think. And now we already have these crazy plans on the table, an accumulation plan. We haven't had anything like this on the table before, so check out 21 Bitcoin below. Use the code Bitcoin Hotel to get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. I'll put a link for you down below. Guys, see you soon. Peace out.